Okay. I guess my computer crashed on that one. That's nice. Good to know that's gonna happen. I'm not sure if it's something to do with the memory of me opening up that Python browser, which shouldn't be a problem. But sometimes applications can leak memory and may actually break things. Also, I noticed that looking back, I need to probably zoom in a bit on the code. Let's spread this guy open. So I won't open that window yet, since we're kind of going through some details outside. Okay, back to where we were talking about. So in the end, the GUI, where that browser. So this is where we begin if we run main.py. Do you have to call it main.py? No, you can call it whatever you want technically, but the standard notation is main.py. Just like in HTML, the standard notation is index.html. Am I looking in the bottom again? Why can't I get the stupid raccoon to look in the right place? Gosh, hold on. All right, I'm gonna do that. I think that should be fine. So we've got main py, main one window, new window. So let's take a look at those in a bit. But how do we run the application? Well, we first create an application type class object using the system arguments, which normally would be if you run Python and then run the main.py, you have the ability to do some system arguments. We don't have any here, but these would be the case where you're passing those arguments into the application. So for now, it's kind of not a big deal. Set the application name, just some meta information, and this is how we begin the application, app exec. So we create a window, main window, that's the class app execute, right? That's what I'm thinking of here. App execute, app is this, Q application app, main window. That's weird. I would have expected window to be executed. All right, well, let's take a look at the code. So then as we create that window, main window, this opens up. Super is class specific. At some point, I'm going to have to go through some object-oriented programming. But basically, what it's saying is Q main window is the super object that's being imported. Self is the current object that we're creating, which in retrospect is this window object being created. That's what self represents. And super is a reference to the original that it's importing. So when we do in Python parentheses QMain window in a class, this means we're inheriting from another class. And the QMain window class is right here. So we're basically getting the default settings from that particular existing class, again, that exists in Qt widgets. So this is a case for the browser, just a general name. You don't have to name it browser, but basically this window, this window is going to be referenced as the self keyword. That window will have a browser, what looks like function or class that will essentially begin. Well, it's just being created for now. So how do we set up browser? Well, we need a Q web engine view, which we're going to save inside of browser. We can set the URL to a default here. There's that Q URL to parse these slashes and dots and all the extra functionality there. URL change, connect. URL change looks like it's going to be a connection to the button or a function whenever we change the URL and press enter. Load finish. These URL changed and load finished. Now that I see them pop up here, now I can tell this is a class because that's what exists inside of that. URL changed and load finished exists inside of QWeb Engine View. We've only just saved QWeb Engine View inside of browser. We could have easily named this QWeb Engine Browser as well, but that's going to break stuff now. Well, not really break stuff. The rest of these things aren't going to function right. So I'm just going to revert back to browser, but this is the idea, is that you can name this whatever you want. This is one of those custom variables. But since we're saving an existing standardized class inside of this variable, it inherits some internal functions or methods. So we're going to connect a function which should exist in self as well. We're going to observe that later. Update URL bar and update title. So URL change, it's going to be in the update URL bar. And this is potentially when we're clicking on links to change automatically. It'll update the URL bar itself. And when the load is finished, we're going to update the title as well. Set central widget should kind of give you the space for the browser itself. That browser will be in the center of the widget space that we would see in that window. Status bar should be the bottom, so potentially when I load this guy again, which I won't load for too long, we should have a status loading at the bottom. No, I don't see it then. Oh wait, yeah, there is something back down. Yeah, yeah. Oh wait, maybe this. Okay, the status bar is probably only gonna show us the information. Go home, reload page down at the bottom here. There's nothing crazy there. Then there's a function to set that status bar. This connected to self might be from the QMain window. So because again the self is a reference to this function, this variable that will be an object after we set it equal to the main window class, and the main window class imports the QMain window class that comes from the Qt system. So we're technically importing some defaults, and in those defaults, we have stuff like set status bar and status. In fact, we may even have browser to be. I don't know. I don't think browser should be, because we had to create browser with this. So browser probably doesn't exist by default in the QMain window. We're creating it here since we're using this equal sign. But here we never really created anything extra for the set central widget. So that should be part of the QMain window. Self status. Then, okay, self status is the status bar, Q status bar created in the spot. Self dot set status doesn't exist in the Q status bar because we're not using this in between. If it was there, we would actually have self.status.set status bar. But since we're not using the same, I guess, think of them as directories, right? If you're looking at any of these dots, just replace them with your typical directory structure knowledge, and it'll make more sense. Self has status in it, but in this case, it didn't have that. I added it, right? So in this case, browser self has browser in it, and browser has load finish in it, and load finish has connect in it. So if you think of those dots as basically directory structures, it's a lot easier to absorb. But in this case, we're not looking at it inside the status, we're looking at it inside of the self. So it looks like QMain window, which is a representation of self, has the set status bar function, which should activate and work with this variable. So potentially not a good idea to change that from itself, because maybe set status bar. Oh, no, never mind. We set it here. So you can name it whatever you want. Yeah, so you can name it set status 2 as long as you change this and it attaches itself that way. Okay, that's fair. So some things we can create on our own behalf with our own naming conventions. Other things have to be done exactly as is. In this case, URL change, load finished. We never created those. We created browser. because we use the equal sign, but we never created URL changed and load finish. So we have to kind of keep in mind some things change, or some things are changeable by us or creatable by us, customizable, if you want to think of it that way. Other things cannot be, like URL changed. We never had an equal sign anywhere, so that would give us an assumption that this is actually coming from whatever browser is being held as. And browser is holding the QWeb engine view, right? So QWeb engine view is where URL changed and load finish is coming from. So this is a very huge object orientated programming mindset. It takes a little bit to kind of absorb, and it takes a lot of observations and looking through code. But again, if you just swap this dot for a slash and just think of it like you would, Google, kind of, not even Google, um, just like your typical structure, right? So if I go to downloads, where's downloads located? And nope, that's not a good example. Let's go to one of my hard drives. Where's my hard drive located in? It's G dot colon slash. And if I go tutoring and I go resources and I go, actually, let's go here. Tutoring, let's look at some of my old students here. HS, JavaScript, assets, CSS, yada, yada. So all of those folders we just went through are represented through the slash convention. One is inside the other over time. It's the same concept here. One is inside the other, and it's always the case that the end is inside of the previous. Connect is a special case, but we can still imagine that there's a right to left hierarchy. The left being the highest possible, the beginning, the end, the right being the lowest possible, the end. Okay, so we create Q toolbar, navigation, set some icons, icon sizes, add toolbar, boom. So we're seeing a structure, a pattern, if you will. We're seeing create some definition of one of these tools. So we can now imagine we're probably going to have a couple of other things. VQ, QVBox layout, main window. We might have some QURLs. We use that Q icon for the application, key sequence. Well, again, we're not really building too much of a complicated system here. Really, it is file dialog as well. So you're going to have to create a new file dialog. So you create using the equal sign of the existing tool, save it into self. Actually, this is interesting. This didn't save to self, but I guess this case, we're not editing it. So why would you want to do a self, and then why would you want to do no self? Normally you want to do self when you want to save it, aka it's in window, and I can do something like window dot browser. That exists inside of it. Not sure what that will do exactly, but this is the browser that we have defined here. And inside of that, there's um, dot URL change. Change. There it is. It's actually predicting it for me. And I don't know if I can do connect from out here. Maybe I can. Okay, so I can. So this is kind of like what we're looking at when anytime we see browser or self dot browser dot URL change dot connect. Instead of this case, we're outside of the class, right? So outside of the class, we're referencing the current variable that's holding the main window. Inside of the class, because it's a blueprint, that's one way to think of classes. The object is on the outside, the finished house, if you will, the actual house you live in. But the class is more of like a blueprint of how that house would function before it's actually built. So that's why we don't have the house existing yet. So we're using the keyword self to essentially reference that to be built house down the road. And you can call it browser 1, browser 2. I mean, in this case, it's window. So I can call it window 1. I wonder if I can actually do that. Let me see if it'll open 2 windows now. Hey, look at that. See? Okay, that's pretty. Oh, okay. I thought it crashed for a second. So now we have window 1 and window 2. I don't know which one it is, which one which is. But the whole point is that this is how we self-contain applications independently. Now, if I change the browser in one of them, the self of that individual one will change, but the other one will not be affected. See what I mean there? I don't know what's gonna happen. No, nothing's gonna happen if I do window twice. Just the window by itself, I think. Let me see. If I do, technically, theoretically, this would open the same window twice. No, it wouldn't. And then when I change the URL in one of them, it'll change it in both, right? Because it's the same variable name. However, that doesn't work because it just kind of redoes the same thing again on the same variable. It erases the old variable and basically does it again. So that's an idea. Another way to think of this, like player one, player two, two players with different hit points, different defense, different attack. And when one's hit points goes down, the self adjusts player one's hit points. And that's what self is a reference to. If you have multiple objects, self is a reference to whichever one that's being created as an object. Again, class blueprint. I should probably put like an object oriented course in this. And then this is the actual object created from blueprint. And we can create as many of them as we want, as we just saw. Okay. So that's kind of to wrap your head around the self thing. And then we kind of saw that we can access browser URL change outside by doing window browser URL change. That's the case if you want to actually manually change that. In fact, I guess a case would be if I want to do, nah, do I want to do that yet? Let's keep going. Let's keep going. So Q toolbar navigation, set icon size. That's going to be probably the little icon in the top left corner. This one right there. Okay. Add toolbar nav. Not too sure. Shortcut open, Q shortcut, key sequence. Okay, so you add a key sequence F5. Shortcut open. Refresh. Is this how you do the refresh? Let me see. I guess this reopens the same one. Yeah, I guess whoa, it changed the dark theme. Nice. So it just resets. Dang, that loads pretty fast on a regular browser. Dang, son. So it refreshes the same URL. So that's kind of what it's doing there. It's a trick, right? Shortcut open, Q shortcut, Q sequence, F5, self. Shortcut open is now being attached to an activated sequence. And there it is. Self browser reload. So now browser, this function that we created up here, so you always got to keep track of where each one is coming from. QWeb engine has an internal function called reload, and we're calling that through the browser variable that we saved in the self. Got it, right? And we're just using the reload just like we were using the URL change or the load finish. Those both exist. All those three of them exist inside of browser now since we set it equal to QWeb engine view. It's difficult to wrap your head around objects and orientated programming, but I think we're getting along pretty smoothly for now. Shortcut open, activated connect. Okay, so that's the connecting factor. Connect is a kind of a universal keyword, I believe, within Qt, I feel like, or either being imported from QMain window. Or really, no, connect exists inside of all of these. Connect should be a function that's basically being inherited inside of load finish, URL changed, activated. In the Qt programming, in the original developers, they had to attach connect to the appropriate pieces, and we're just connecting or using it to connect whatever we need as a function. So somewhere in there exists a connect function, and they just attach it to activated, triggered, a load finished, URL changed, and anything relative, anything that we need to connect to another function. What that does really is then when something happens, we can run a function after the connection happens. So if we press enter, if we press a button, then we activate whatever is in connect. That's it. This is similar to Lua and similar to how Roblox Studios will connect, let's say, you touching a block with getting hurt or gaining hit points. Same factor. There is a connect also there. Although I believe it's something like on in Lua Roblox, it's something like on on touch or something, connect some function. On collision, on touch, I can't remember what it was. It's been a while since I've done that stuff. But in that same factory, we're using this connect in the same way. Not that you know Roblox from the beginning, just saying it's a universal tool that even Roblox uses within Lua programming to basically get a health pack or touching lava on the ground, whatever the case may be. The connect just connects a function that either gives you health or takes it away. Okay, back button, Q action, Q icon, OS path join, arrow. I guess we don't have arrow? Do we have arrow? What's arrow? Hey, how come it's not loading my arrow? Oh, maybe because it's not compiled and it's probably running. Yeah, it's probably running from like the a very different location. So then how do I get the arrow? Well, I technically have to open integrated terminal here and then run Python from here. Uh, and there it is. Now I see my arrow. That's because in that case, the the location I'm opening it is within this browser folder. However, when I press that button up there, the little shortcut button, that's actually opening it up from the beginning of this whole all the way up here in Python. So there's no images out here. There's just data, JSONs, data files, yada, 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 right? So there's no images here for uh, that application. The images are inside of this folder in a whole different location. So if I wanted to do the images, it works. Cool, there it is. I can press the buttons now as images. That's actually fancier. I was wondering why I wasn't doing it right. But if I do it from here as a quick, and maybe that's why it crashed. Interesting. Maybe something is causing it to loop into my memory too much. That's an interesting one. Anyway, that's why that differs. And you still can use it. Just make sure you're running the application from the appropriate place. So there are actual images being attached, which I was surprised because I thought it didn't do it. OS path join. So this is the reason why we have the OS import because we want to basically join some paths together. In this case, I can probably add the other parts of this hierarchy. I could put demo and then PyQt6 and then Python GUIs example and then GUIs in front of this images text here. And then that'll actually open the image also. However, I'm not going to go that far into it because obviously there's no need. Set status tip. Okay, so the status bar is just for these kind of status things. It's not for the loading set of information whenever a browser tells you loading, connecting, etc. A status tip is just go back to previous page when you put your mouse on top of the back button, set status tip. There it is, right? And then there's the back that's being actually printed if the image fails to load. So that back text is being printed here if the image fails to load. There that is. Self is the attachment that it's being put on. So the Q action is attaching to the self, to the object that's being created, which is window. Remember the name window. That's the self. Don't lose track of that one. So then when it's triggered, when the back button is triggered, then there's, of course, inside of the Q, what is it called? Q Web Engine View. There's a back button that's being inherited into browser, that's being passed through all the way here from the self. So again, yeah, why would we want a self versus nothing? Well, once you put a image, an icon, you're probably not going to change the icon to the browser. In fact, hey, what was the icon of the browser? I had to run it locally. No, that's the wrong one. Hello? Hello? Is it me you're looking for? Yeah, right there. Hey, it's something. Can't see what it is, but let's take a look at it. Icon? Logo? Logo? Q size, nav to navigation, Q bar set. Set icon size, Q size. What? Tiny little text. What's the icon to this thing? What the? What? That's adorable. Oh yeah, that's the icon. Oh, okay. Oh, look at him. He made it different sizes. I'm not even sure what that's about. But sure, that's an icon. So that's being displayed in that browser. And that's what we're looking at here. This guy. Q size navigation. So nav TB navigation toolbar icon. Q toolbar set icon size, Q size 1616 toolbar. Well, I guess I don't know where it's being. If I wanted to find it actually, I just look for its name. MA icon. MA icon. There it is. Set window icon, Q icon. Okay, so then I don't know what this is. Where'd it go? Yeah, see how much time? I don't even know if I'm gonna. How much have I gone so far? Oh, buddy. Yeah, 30 minutes. I'll probably do another 30. I'm getting tired already. What time is it? Yeah, slightly getting tired. So we'll go as much as we can. At least now it's the setup. We're just learning actually how Qt works. Later is the actual functions that are connected to everything. So there's the save HTML. After it's being triggered from the menu, save file, open file after it's triggered from the menu, update title, update URL, I think was the other one. Dang, that's a lot of, no? New. Let's do this. Dun, 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 dun. Save file. Print page, there's your printing part. Okay, so browser or Q web engine thingy has a print function already inside. Navigate home, browser for home. That's the button for the home, and it's being done this way. Other cases, we can set this as a self.home variable, and then we get another button that changes the self.home variable. So we can change the home. Otherwise, you can't really change it from this format because it's kind of being hard coded as a string straight in the code. But if you set it in a variable, you can change the variable anytime you need to, as a variable is a changeable uh, block box. I'm gonna call it a box because you can put stuff in a box. You can put a URL in the box as a variable, and you can change the stuff of the box. You can name the box. You can put a label on your box, say kitchen, and then your kitchen might change 10 years from now, but you can still put stuff in that box that will represent the kitchen. So in this case, we can represent that box as homepage, and then we can change the contents of that box based on whether if we want to change the actual homepage or not. In this case, we cannot because it is straight up what we call hard coded. Cannot be changed unless you actually open the code and change it. But variables are very nice as they are changeable. Okay, you're about to navigate to URL. How do we navigate? Self.url about URL bar text. So the URL bar. So here's another way you can navigate these. URL bar, I'll do Control F. And I'll take a look at all the locations URL bar is being used. So right now we're in the open file. Okay, so the very last thing we do after we open file is set the text of the file name that we opened up. Okay, that makes perfect sense. How does it read? Okay, so there's your HTML reader. But that was weird because I tried to open one and it didn't quite open. So maybe my antiviruses and firewalls are stopping it from accessing my local file system, which is normal. Add widget, nav tb. Oh, right. Okay, so nav tb is a container. Q toolbar. Okay, so it's a container for objects. It's not so much necessary to change. It's just a container that gets eventually used up. So you add an action, back button, you add an action, next button. So you create the back button, you add it to the nav TB, you create a next button, you add it to the nav TB, you add a bunch of stuff to the nav TB, you add a separator, add the widget, and eventually we load it, right? So help menu, self menu. Hold on, let me do. Because after we load it, we don't need to think about it. Oh no, that's the last time right there. So the last time that that's get used is here, looks like, right? Yeah, now we're back to one. So some things don't need to be saved. And when we save something in the self, it lets us access it later. But we don't need to access the whole nav bar. We just need to access the individual pieces like the URL bar, I guess the HTTPS icon, the buttons. We may want to change the, actually, no, look at that. This one is not a self. It's not self.button. It's just home button, not self.home button. So this shows me that there's no necessary action or need to change any of its pieces. We don't have to change the URL for its home icon, the text of it, set status tip, go home. There's nothing here that needs to be changed. So that's why we're not saving it to self. But the reason we set self is because sometimes we want to load in our code, not in the browser, but in the actual code down the road, like all the other functions down here, navigate home, all this stuff, we can still call self and browser. See, we've saved self browser so we can use it later, but we're not going to use navtb in any of these functions. When it's loaded, it's loaded. The buttons, they're loaded as well. They're pretty simple to work with. They're back buttons and etc. All right, home button connects to this function. If we want to connect to the home button, well, the only thing we should really change is maybe the URL of what home URL link is. But we don't have to change the text in the status tip. We don't have to change the directory of the image icon and yada, yada, yada. So some things don't need to be put in the self because self is a kind of internal class, because we're in the class, internal class save location. Think of it that way too. We can reuse certain things from that self if necessary. The URL bar is going to get reused many times. We're going to change websites a lot. Stop button, not necessarily, just has one function. Self browser stop, the function that is represented by the Q web engine dot stop. navtb, add action. Cool. Once you add it, stop button, navtb carries it. Okay, I guess the toolbar would get loaded automatically. And there it is, self.show. So the final aspect after we set all the details up, the nav bar, which is interesting because the nav bar didn't get attached anywhere. Did we add nav bar, add action, file menu, add action? See, in the file Qt in my other application, it was dialog. After I init and created the same similar process, a push button with options. I saved it as self button one so I can access it later. We can save it to the layout. Depending on the way you name things, it's a lot easier to look at. I like to be specific. So this is the layout we're saving, add widget and stuff too. Add widget, add widget, add widget. But later, the one thing that confuses me is we attach everything to the main layout and then we set the layout and start a session. So that's something different. Maybe it's because this is a dialogue and not a main window. That's also a factor that's going to be playing different. That's why also I'm looking at all this code so I can kind of see any differences from what I've done in my previous applications to what other types of applications you work as. So I'm assuming that when I attach everything to main window, I set the layout as main window, self set, and then I self start, and then I put the window title in. Okay. All right. That's fair enough. Because in this case, we're just doing a built-in function from the self, which is, again, always thinking about where it's coming from, right? Oh, actually, I don't have to do that. Self is coming from the Q main window. Self is inherited all the functions from the Q main window. Dot show is just a function inside of that that finally opens up that specific browser. All right. So I think I'm going to cut it there because we've got a lot of other pieces to go through. If you guys want to figure out and see how all of these work, aka make more videos of this particular browser thing, and then potentially go into other demos like calculator, more stuff, calculations, algorithms. I've done a lot of calculators in the past. It's one of the tutorials I normally do for most of my sessions with students. But if you want to see any of these, like, subscribe, show your support, and I'll be happy to do more. I just don't know what to focus on, right? I like to play games sometimes, but I also like to teach. So if you guys guide me on what you want to see, even leave a comment, let me know what you want to see. I'll be happy to make some um, videos on it. And of course, if you ever need any further help, like all of this is just Chinese to you, uh, feel free, man, to visit me. Go to no, stop with the updates. Oh my gosh. Patreon dot super or .com/super scholar Chris MIA. I provide a single monthly session. If you just want 1 hour a month, that's it. Super affordable, 20 bucks a month. If it's for school, maybe you need help with math. Maybe you just want to make sure that if anything happens, you have somebody you can call. I do have different types of packages as well. So 2 monthly sessions is 25, but these are refreshable. So you can get two at a time for 25 each. But this is only once. This is not refreshable. So it's only 1 hour a month. I want it to be as affordable as possible, but I also don't want to overburden myself over time with the most affordable option I give. So if 1 hour is not enough, don't work with this one. Try and get a 2 monthly session hours. And we've got more, four for 90, eight for 150, and I'm packaging them more hours for less money. If you don't want to be a member, that's also fine. Just consider using one of these guys. I just sell one session for 45 and you can use it whenever you want. The membership hours, of course, they refresh every month, but this one you can basically buy it as long as you have a receipt. Well, it can be today, it can be tomorrow, it can be a year from now. I'm always going to be teaching. Um, so consider that as a factor. And then, yeah, this one's two for 75. So it is definitely a better case scenario to be a member because you're going to not only support me continuously, I'll be supporting you continuously. And we have a better connection, right? But, case scenario, you just want to buy an hour, test it out. You can always try this one here for 21 hour a month, no refreshes, does not roll over or it's not reloadable. But everything else is reloadable. So this one's reloadable. If you run out of those 2 hours, you can get two more, 50 bucks. If you run out of 4 hours, you can get four more, 90 bucks, and so on and so forth. It just make sure that both of us are working on the same page. Because sometimes it can get a little difficult. I want to help students, but sometimes they crave the help and then they cannot pay. And then it's kind of like me putting work into something that never bears anything back. And then I end up not being able to pay my bills. So, you know, to kind of get both of us on the same page. You can also join for free. Don't think you have to pay for anything. If you want to get in contact with me, join for free. If you want to have primary or um, counseling sort of support, how to get to certain classes, what order to take certain classes in. One specific answer or question is, do I have to take all my classes in university? No. Community colleges and local colleges, smaller colleges, normally have better professors. They have smaller classes, better professors, and I recommend taking as many classes there as you can. It's cheaper, you save money, and whatever that they don't have, that's the one you take in university. Because university is going to bite your leg off with a lot of money. They're going to take up a lot of your time and money. And most of the time, it's like putting you in a class of 300 students and you can't even raise your hand to ask the question. This is why I promote community colleges, smaller colleges. They're more effective at actually having a classroom session. They're cheaper because they're smaller, and they're not looking for publicity with researchers and essentially educators and not educators primarily. They're researchers first, educators second. I've worked with a lot of professors, And that's basically their job. They're meant to write research papers for, in my case, UCF, University of Central Florida, and they're not the happiest person when they have to go to class and teach. They open up a PowerPoint, there's 300 students in front of you, and they just talk for an hour, and then us, us as professor assistants have to come in and answer all your questions. We have sessions with you privately, and the professor just F's off and does his own thing with the research or whatever other responsibility he has to do with the university itself. So I always recommend save yourself money, go to community college, get algebra, college algebra, trigonometry, geometry, calculus, statistics. There's a lot of classes you can do in community college, and then you're going to pay maybe 33%, if not 20%, of what it would cost to take the same class in university. It's the same class, it's the same credit. Why would you pay more to take the same thing? And then just save the ones that you cannot actually take in community college, and you're going to take those in university. Those are the ones you want to leave off. Do as much as you can in the cheaper place because it's the same credit. Why screw yourself over with bigger classes, less one-to-one interactions, right? And more money when you can actually get a smaller class, better professor access, and cheaper classes. It's just, if you don't know, you know now. Like this is the biggest quote unquote hack uh, in going to college. There's no reason to do everything in one place. So that's one of my big ones. But there's a lot of other counseling that I can provide. Anything from tips on how to study, how to identify what kind of learner you are, and a whole bunch. So if you need any support, help, counseling, you can sign up here and you have direct access to the Discord and direct access to me. If you just want to join and support me, I would also appreciate that super much. It's free. Just join. I do post a lot of collections in academia, markets. I do trading, IT stuff, security. So there's plenty of things that you can take a look at here to get a good sense of what I do, what I know, and what I can teach you on top of that. I'm an educator first and a learner second. So whatever I learn, I end up teaching in the second case scenario. I end up using, obviously, creating my own applications. But I like to teach. It's kind of one of my favorite things. I like to help people overcome personal roadblocks, and it's very satisfying when you get that aha moment. So that's it for me. If you want more of any of this, like, subscribe, join me on Patreon, and yeah, talk to you later. What is that? No, raccoon. Raccoon, say bye. Bye, raccoon. Bye. I mean,